Sony New Zealand very generously lent me the SOny A7 III with the Sony 16-35 f2.8 G lens, and I want to have a go with it for shooting video, and more specifically real estate style of video, and also compare it directly to my existing Panasonic GH5. Hi, I'm Grant, and I've been having a bit of a flurry of camera reviews or tests on my channel this year, and Sony New Zealand sent me the A7 III, and I was specifically after giving it a test to see what it was like for shooting real estate style of video. Now, the Sony A7 III has been out for a few years now, and I think it came out in 2018, but what's not to love about a full frame mirrorless camera with a very fast f2.8 lens? So here's a montage of a few of the shots that I've got with this camera. For those of you not familiar with the Sony A7 series, or more specifically the Sony A7 III, here's a few of the features of this camera specific to shooting this style of real estate video. First up, it has a full frame image sensor as opposed to my micro four thirds, bit of a mouthful, crop sensor that my existing Panasonic GH5 has got. It can shoot 4K internal video, but only up to 25 and 30p, and I'll come back to this a little bit later in this video. It has Sony's feature pack menus and picture profile options, including Sony's S-Log2 picture profile, but I shot it mostly in the PP3 picture profile, which is a kind of a standard Rec 709 look, which I like and prefer for this style of shooting. The LCD monitor tilts out and down, but unfortunately doesn't flip out to the side like on my Panasonic. Now, the A7 III actually has a touchscreen LCD monitor, but it's only touch for setting focus or focus points. Now, I quite like this because I find and use it all the time on my GH5, and it's a great way for setting focus. You can touch the point, you can basically set up your camera in autofocus mode and then use the touch screen to lock focus. So it will lock it to manual focus on whatever subject you touch, and I find that's actually quite a good way of getting sharp focus as opposed to using the lens barrel. Now, I've also turned on Sony's clear image zoom feature, which enables a 2x digital zoom when using this lens. So that actually gives you a little bit more reach out of this. For example, the 16-35 lens, it actually gives you the equivalent of 16-70, which is great for picking up perhaps close-up detail shots of things that you are shooting. I've used that clear image zoom before on other Sony cameras, and I find it does a really good job, and there isn't any apparent image degradation using the digital zoom feature. It can shoot up to 120 frames a second, but only in the 1080p mode. Now, this is where this will affect you for you real estate video shooters that want to shoot, and a lot of you do shoot on handheld gimbals, because often when you're shooting real estate styles of video on a handheld gimbal, we are often running them at a higher frame rate, such as 50 or 60p, so we can then slow down the footage when we get back to editing, which helps smooth out your shots. Now, if you want to run in 50 or 60p on this camera, you are forced to be using 1080p only, so you can't use it in 4K, which I can on my GH5. And of course, the other really fantastic feature about these Sony A7 series of cameras is that they are amazing low light shooters. Now, this is a scenario that you will find yourself often in when shooting real estate, because often when you're shooting the interior of homes, they're often poorly lit, or you'll end up in dark rooms, so therefore you'll need to start cranking your ISO to get to set a good exposure, and that's where the A7 series shine. So I took the A7 and this lens to a house that I shot on my previous video on using the iPhone to shoot real estate video, and I took it alongside my Panasonic GH5, and here's some sample shots of putting these two cameras in pretty much as much of the same situation as I can, using both the wide focal lengths on their lens and locking down all the exposure settings to manual settings such as manual white balance, shutter speeds, frame rates, and ISOs. When shooting in 4K, I thought the image quality from both cameras looks fantastic, and it was actually quite hard to pick the difference between the two of them. It's not as evident here watching on YouTube, but when I was watching it on my large monitor back in my office, it was a better test of the quality of the footage coming out of these cameras. Now, one thing of note, if I was using this A7 III again for a real estate job, I'd probably knock back the sharpening on that PP3 picture profile, which is easily done within the menu of the camera, because it just looked a little bit too sharp for me, and you could sort of, the edges were perhaps a little bit ragged or a bit sharp. And of course, when watching this footage back on a large screen monitor, there is of course quite a big jump in quality from 4K to 1080p. Now I have to say, I think the GH5 running its Cine D profile and the A7 III running its PP3 profile, I think the 1080p is slightly better out of the GH5 than it is out of the A7 III. I also found when shooting with the A7 III, you had to be quite careful and protect your highlights, and I think the highlight roll-off, or the way that the GH5 handles the highlight roll-off and overexposed areas, works a bit better on that GH5 than it does on the A7 III. And I'll show you an example here. If you look at the overexposed fence in the background, you still retain some detail on the GH5, but not so much on the A7 III. Now, when I'm running the A7 III on the handheld gimbal here, I'm running it in 1080 and I'm shooting in 50p, and I think it looks fine, but I am sure 4K would look better. However, I would still be more than happy to run that camera in 1080 for client and paid work. Now, while I was here in this house, I also gave the S-Log2 a test on the A7 III, and as you can see, it definitely retains more detail on the highlights area than in the standard Picture Profile 3. Now, I'm not a big fan of shooting S-Log on these smaller mirrorless styles of cameras, and that is mainly because I find it, when you're shooting an S-Log, I find it harder to expose your footage correctly out in the field, and it's definitely harder and takes more time to edit in post-production. And also another point of note when I was shooting this footage, and this is specific to my Moza Air gimbal, is that because the LCD monitor only flips out and doesn't flip around, when I had it balanced on my Moza gimbal, it was actually bumping against the back of the gimbal, so I couldn't really tilt it up too much to look at the monitor when using it on that gimbal. Now, the price of this setup as of the time of recording this video, and I'm going to refer to my notes down here on my laptop. Now, the SOny A7 III comes in at US $1,798, and in New Zealand it's going to cost you $3,249. Now, the Sony 16-35 f2.8G lens, in the US this is going to cost you $2,198, and in New Zealand that lens will set you back $3,899. So the total cost of that setup there would be US $3,996, or in New Zealand that would be $7,148. Now, speaking of lenses, that Sony 16-35 f2.8G lens is a very nice piece of glass, and that 16-35 focal length, especially if you use the 2x clear image zoom on it, that is a really nice lens for shooting real estate, because you will generally, for interiors, you're going to be sitting on the 16 to 20 wide or ultra wide part of it, and the ability to punch in to the 35 or 70 using the clear image zoom for picking up detail. That is a one lens shooting beast right there. Now, if I was buying this setup brand new, you can probably save yourself a bit of money on the lens here, because you don't necessarily need the f2.8 lens for shooting real estate video. Sony makes a 16-35 f4 and it's a bit cheaper, and at the time of recording this, the 16-35 f4 lens was $1,248 US, so $950 cheaper than the f2.8G lens here. And in New Zealand it is $2,095, so $1,804 cheaper for the f4 16-35 range. However, my advice on that one is, if you can afford it, the f2.8 lenses and glass are always generally higher quality, and they will give you the option of shooting in lower light and giving you shallower depth of field. So if your budget can stretch to it, then I'd always say go for the f2.8. If you're on a tight budget and you're looking at either the f4 or the f2.8, I would say go for the f4. And another factor you've got to remember too, if you are only going to go for the f4, this is a great low light shooting camera, so you can use the fantastic ISO range in this camera to help you out in low light situations, rather than using the aperture in the lens. So to wrap it up, this is a fantastic combo and more than capable package for shooting real estate styles of video. I really liked the full frame 4K look out of this camera, and it's a bit of a shame for real estate videos that it doesn't have the 50 and 60p. And would I swap my existing GH5 for this combo? And the answer would be no, but both cameras are fantastic tools for producing beautiful video. That's it from me, and hopefully I'll see you in the next video.